Welcome everyone to Arnica's webinar, From Vibe Coding to Viable Coding, How to Make AI Work in Your Enterprise. We're so excited to have you. We're really excited to be able to describe to you some things that have been on a lot of people's mind right now. And I'm sure you're joining us with quite a few questions. Um, a lot of confusion between AI, vibe coding, what does it mean in the enterprise? A lot of developers using vibe coding, but how is it really benefiting the business? Well, lucky for you, we've got two experts here to unravel some of those mysteries, help us work through some of those challenges, and come up with some solutions for you. So I've got Nir and Eran, and they're going to introduce themselves and tell you why they're qualified to talk to you today about vibe coding. Nir, Eran, why don't you introduce yourselves? We'll start with Nir.
Sure. So happy to be here. And maybe quick on my side, I'm a security practitioner, one of the founders of Arnica. And one of my main thoughts around this entire topic will be really around how do we get the things that security teams care about? And we'll discuss about that later. And Ron will introduce himself now.
Sure. My name is Eran, I'm one of the co-founders here. Uh, been on the cusp of security all of my career, but my role here is to represent the point of view of the developer in this journey.
Absolutely. And we need your input because that's what a lot of people need to know about. Um, the first very important question I have for you all, and I'm sure is on the mind of a few people in the audience, and that is, what is vibe coding? We need to start with some definitions because vibe coding is very prevalent right now, but it's sort of meaning different things to different people. So what is it? Let's start with some definitions.
Yeah. So first of all, it's an amazingly recent term. Do you know when it was coined?
No. Well,
Yesterday.
Pretty much. So this was coined in February this year by the legendary Andre Karpathy, one of the co-founders of OpenAI. And the idea was that you can move into natural language without knowing any coding, any background. Anyone can build anything. And part of the aspect of vibe coding is you write it, you don't have to read it. If it works, right? And what could go wrong, right? This is basically the worst nightmare for security practitioners. Having that said, the industry is trying to move toward a better term, vibe engineering. Simon Wilson was trying to coin it recently, but I think the name vibe coding stuck. So when we talk about vibe coding, we're talking about code that AI is writing, but still people still read, right?
working on vibes, right?
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic. So now we know a little bit about what vibe coding is. What are some of the benefits that enterprises have been experiencing when their developers are engaging in vibe coding?
Right. So I can tell you about my experience in my team, and we can talk about what other our customers and others are saying. Um, Vibe coding can be a huge performance boost for developers if used correctly. It can allow writing more features in a shorter amount of time and allows junior developers to be able to do a little bit more than their experience might allow them, which obviously, we're talking about benefits, so I'm not going to hint about the risks. It can allow much more code to be written in a shorter amount of time. That's pretty much it. You can prototype, you can do MVPs much faster than before, and you don't have to wait for a developer to do that. Product manager, marketing manager, they can go and build prototypes of things without understanding a line of code, right?
One of the things that kind of make me think while you're thinking about it is, um, think about product management priorities. You typically have high value, maybe some of the development is, more complex. Some of that is simpler, but still deprioritized because, whatever reasons. And one of the things that vibe coding really allows you to do is also go and, tag, Cursor, Copilot, you name it, in your workflows. and simply ask it to develop this, easy lift application or easy lift functionality that would be quote unquote fairly easy review for the dev. Um, and still you can have the value of being able to develop also the things that are not top priority that may be quick wins that eventually everyone can benefit out of this, and you didn't use much of the developer's time just to build this.
As a product marketer, that sort of stuff speaks to me, but as an engineer, I'm sure that's probably getting your hackles up. So, speaking of getting your hackles up, what are the challenges of vibe coding?
Do you have an hour?
We've got a half an hour and we've already gotten through 10 minutes of it.
So I think, Nir, I think I'm going to let you start, from putting the security hat first, and then I can add some challenges from the engineering side.
Yeah, sure. So I think that there's few fundamental challenges as I'm thinking about it from the security standpoint. First of all, is that code is simply not generated securely by default, and the thing is that uh, there are some issues that are very easy to detect with a traditional static code analysis, right? The SQL injections of the world, kind of more basic things that you don't really need anything special to identify those vulnerabilities. Of course, they happen at scale, but but in essence, what we have seen with AI generated code is that certain risks actually start going up the stack, meaning it's no longer only the technical issues that you can identify in the code. We've seen business logic errors that are made based on assumptions. We've seen privacy violations. Even if you kind of go to a more advanced mode and use some custom models, you can see backdoors. It's all about the about what you prompt it to do and what it is trained on. And eventually, as Eran mentioned, you have maybe less experienced developers, maybe more green developers that just vibe their way and prompt to build certain functionality. The challenge is that uh, now the real bottleneck is with reviewing those changes. And not only developers have this challenge, as a matter of fact, even security teams have those challenges because security teams were involved in, let's say, X amount of pull requests that had vulnerabilities. Now the security teams need to be involved in more than 2x of the pull requests, and they need to review them. And some of them are a bit more sophisticated than just looking for the next OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities.
Yep. Yeah, the code generated by the current agentic coding, Cursor, Copilot, Cloud Code, look to untrained eye, they can look very convincing, right? And the devil is in the details, and you can have a lot of because that's how they trained on, right? They're trained on humanly generated code, and humans don't always write code in a secure way, right? So yeah, you might see less obvious string concatenation with untrusted input, but surprisingly, you'll even see those as well. So the ways that things can go wrong grow the more the context grows, right? So the more you type in the chat, do this, do that, fix this, all revert, all that. The models are mathematically are losing context, and then things go and degrade significantly, right? And the developers that don't always know the better will basically generate uh, hideous security vulnerabilities that are going to be much harder to detect, and especially going to be hard to detect with the traditional static analysis tools that are focusing on a single file or at most, a file and a JSON file. Those security vulnerabilities, as Nir said, that moving up the stack can span an entire repo, right? The context that is needed to understand them is very, very high, right? So this is a very, very big challenge that is not easily solved by just, a better prompt.
Do you think some of these challenges we haven't encountered yet because some of this vibe coding has been put into production and we won't see these outcomes for a while?
100%. 100%.
Yep,
Yes,
absolutely.
the joke is, it was recently announced like 90% of Invis code is written by AI, just the day before, it happened yesterday. Obviously, unrelated, but it's the fact that people are joking about it. It means that, if you ask security practitioners everywhere, um, the trust in AI generated code is not going up.
The trust isn't going up, but the usage certainly is.
Exactly. That is exactly the problem. Yeah.
hmm So we just heard from the DORA report, which is the Google Cloud issued report. The 2025 report shows that 90% of developers use AI in their daily work. They're vibe coding, they're using AI, they're doing it every day, and it's not going down. So how are we dealing with that is the question. That really backs up exactly what you're saying. And the developer velocity is going up twice as fast, but how are we keeping up from an AppSec velocity perspective? This goes exactly to what you're talking about, Nir. The volume of AI-assisted code is going up, but the bottleneck still becomes how are we even assessing what that code looks like from a security perspective? So I'd love to ask you sort of how are we as an enterprise dealing with these AI challenges? How are we consulting with our customers to figure out how we deal with them?
So maybe I'll start there. Essentially, the key challenges that we see within agentic software development lifecycle, which is kind of quite different than a traditional software development lifecycle, are mainly around, how do you get the developer adoption to use the security guidelines,
Mhm.
right? And we see the same problem with authorship, for example, with AI. So, for example, one of the things that we've seen across more regulated industries is the ownership of the code and making essentially providing this proof that it was reviewed by the right person and and there's no backdoors and so on and so on. Again, back to the up the stack issues.
Mhm.
And and on top of this ownership and adoption problem, eventually there is an issue, kind of side issue. Somewhat it's related to security, but in essence, let's assume that you have an agent that writes code, and the code is not secure by default, right? So you have then the scanner by the AppSec product that identifies those vulnerabilities, and then you have again the same bottleneck. It's in the pull request. Now it's added to the security team to review. And now let's say that the devs are a bit faster than security in most cases. So the devs resolved all of the comments that the let's say the agentic reviewer, if they have one, did. And then security are kind of still in that process where they too late in the game after the code is already generated when it's reviewed and the code cannot be merged. And I think you kind of prompted, quote unquote, the next slide. Um, but in essence, there is a solution, and the solution is really within the workflow. The workflow is really a developer native workflow, but it needs to adhere to very specific agentic rules. So the way to think about it is that um, let's say that the agent writes code, the agent needs to be able to write the code securely by default. And uh, and if it doesn't, then and only then you need to have it in this pull request. And if you can get into this situation, you will get to the point where the security team needs to be involved in less and less and less pull requests and code reviews. And by doing so, this is kind of how you get to the real productivity gain that security teams get. Now, the way that we solve it in Arnica is that uh, you actually integrate Arnica into your existing workflows. And the way that it works is that you first of all install Arnica on your Microsoft Teams or Slack. And the reason why you install Arnica on Microsoft Teams and Slack is because you want 100% adoption of the security requirements and any findings that come out of the scanners that will go directly to the dev. And by saying going directly to the dev, what happens if the dev is an agent, right? So in Arnica, we have a quite sophisticated logic that identifies and kind of maps the right author that it needs to go to. So for example, in Arnica's workflow, we can identify who is the developer that prompted, let's say, GitHub Copilot to write this functionality. And then if there's any vulnerability, Copilot will then, will generate, let's say, the vulnerable code, but the one that will get the notification about this would be the developer.
I have
That
a question. I want to ask a question.
yes.
Why not use IDE plugins then?
Uh, will that be a thing? Maybe
That's a
was a
good topic for
question.
discussion. Like, do you think we're gonna have IDEs in the future?
So listen, realistically, with most of the customers that we spoke, and by saying most, there's 99% of the customers that we spoke with, they didn't manage to pass the 20% adoption of the IDE security plugins. And and that gets to the point where you can't really scan every single code change that happens. You can't really identify the vulnerabilities as early as possible because again, if it goes back to the pull request, it's too late, right? Now, what happens with agents? Do they have an IDE plugin?
They don't.
No,
There's
they
not
don't have a
plugin
plugin.
too. Yeah. There's no
Yeah.
ID.
So why do you need an IDE, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so the point here is that there's lack of adoption of ID plugin. We don't know uh, how much of the new code will be generated within an IDE anytime soon. So how do you actually capture all of this,
Less and less. Yeah.
right? Um, so back to kind of how Arnica operates and how it actually works. So we definitely connect to Slack and Teams. The way that it works in quite unique way is that everything is communicated with chat ops directly with the developers. Meaning, if we found a vulnerability, let's say that we connected to your, GitHub or whatever, GitHub, GitLab, Azure DevOps, Bitbucket, and so on. We actually subscribed to webhooks. And if code is being pushed, it can be by, again, the dev, the agent. Arnica scans the diffs, and if there's any vulnerability, then we communicate with the dev in a private, blameless, and shameless way via Slack and Teams. This is where we either fix the vulnerability automatically, such as, let's say hard-coded secret. Arnica automatically rewrites those commits because we don't want the secret to be in the Git history. Or we suggest code fixes. It can be, AI code fixes. It can be a specific version in SCA that needs to be upgraded, which is more deterministic. And in essence, this is where we also run not only a traditional SAST. This is where we run also a hybrid agentic SAST, which combines both the deterministic vulnerabilities we need to identify that are very technical, like the SQL injections, the XSSs of the world, the OWASP top 10, and so on. And then we use a multi-agent system that is built as close as possible to deterministic to actually identify those issues up the stack, identify backdoors, identify those privacy violations, identify anything that the security team can determine as a violation of their governance. And by doing so, the vast majority of the issues that we flag on every single code push, and this is the 78% that you see here, were actually resolved before the pull request is opened. Now, if you
I
wonder
see a
how much
question here in the chat. Let me know if it's okay to. So there's a question here about do customers need to do anything in their CI/CD pipeline to make it happen?
No, there is no need to do anything in the pipeline. It's all webhooks based, which means that it's real time with absolutely zero code changes. in order to integrate and see it across the company. Um, and, um, and as a result of that, actually, the vast majority of the issues are never even merged into a release or production branch. There's one more piece that may be worth mentioning in the same workflow. What we have seen across many vendors is that they know how to open a pull request with a fix, with let's say an AI code fix. Um, the main question you need to ask yourself, again with the same workflow, is what will be the merge rate of this newly created pull request? Obviously, there is a demo. You create a pull request, you merge, which is great. There's way more complexities in the development lifecycle when you create such a pull request. Does it have conflicts over time? When do you close it? When do you need to reopen? How do you track that it's actually merged across the enterprise? Maybe there is a code change that fixes it partially, and then the new code fix doesn't change it, and maybe the context changed. There's so many questions that need to be tracked. Um, or there's another way to do this. In Arnica, we actually piggyback on pull requests. So if it's a new vulnerability, Arnica will piggyback on an existing pull request, of course, and put an inline finding as well as an AI code suggestion. The If it's an existing finding, let's say if you have a vulnerability that passed SLA, I don't know, maybe a critical vulnerability that you need to fix within 30 days, then what Arnica can do is that we can actually uh, uh, add ourselves to any open pull request and make sure that it's the fix is merged with this open pull request. Now, it's not only on findings and risks. The thing is that by being able to piggyback on pull requests, we actually have more advanced capabilities to add any governance that is needed across the enterprise. It can be from simple things like adding um, OCI tags to Docker files in order to tag which Docker file on every Docker file what generated it, right? Or which repo it came from. And it can go up to the point of actually committing agentic rules into each repo. And for those that don't know what agentic rules are, maybe, you know what, Eran, do you want to kind of talk about that for
Yeah,
a second?
sure. Yeah. So um, when first vibe coding tools came out to the world, they write one size fit all cookie cutter based on the prompt, the system prompt, that the way cursor wants to write or the way the model is trained to write code. And it's definitely not one size fit all. Every developer who is onboarding to a new repository, no matter where they worked, they can be the world champion, ex Google, ex everyone writes code differently. So they need to do a lot of untraining and relearning in any team to write code that adheres to that team. And then the brilliant idea was every company created their own format. It's a markdown file that has rules, and it's very simple. The agent is basically instructed to look for those rules, basically add it to the context of what they do, and whenever they write code, they need to adhere to those rules, and they can be style rules, it can be how to do sanitization, it can be security, doesn't have to be security related. It can be this is, we use spaces versus tabs, as simple as that. And the interesting thing about it is that this can be used without an IDE plugin, right? So all of the major vendors today support a file called agents.md, MD for Markdown. It's a file that sits in the root of the source code repo. So it's independent of IDEs. It can be in the offline agent. An AI can write code. A human can write code and read it and actually follow those rules. And it's not perfect, but it gives you the most best effort possible to generate the code the way you want it initially. And as I said, there's no perfect solution, but it gets very, very close to adhering to those rules. So if you haven't used a rule file for security or non-security reasons, that's highly recommended. And now the challenge is, how do you make developers have that rule file in the repo? You can ask them, right? But Nir, I think you can follow up on the security challenge of like, oh, we have this great thing. I want to use it. How do I do it?
And how do you apply it across the different tools that they're using? Because I can guarantee you in an enterprise, they're not just using Cursor. They're using Cursor and Claude and OpenAI. They're using every single model, right? So,
And most likely they're using things that you don't even know, right?
yeah, exactly.
Shadow IT, there's Shadow AI.
Shadow AI. I love that.
You take a credit card and pay for a service.
So I'd love, now seems like a really good time to show you how to solve that challenge. So I'd like to invite Nir to show us how we can implement some of these rules from the source code. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Nir is going to show us a demo.
Yeah. So I think maybe, we'll start with, Eran just mentioned, Agents MD. You can actually go to the website of agents.md and see exactly how it is defined and where it is defined and what type of vendors actually exist that can support it. But if you look at each of the specific vendors, like GitHub has their own filing structure, and Cursor has their own filing structure. So, for example, in Cursor, you'll have multiple MDC, which is Markdown with comments files that you can modify, and the AI will need to respect those. In Claude, it will be one file that, if you want to add your security requirements, you need to be very specific to the structure of this file. So those files are essentially being picked up every single time that the agent actually picks up the work and starts working on it. Now, what we did in our demo, we actually did a couple of things. So first of all, I prompted for created a very simple issue on my GitHub here. You can see an issue that I just asked it to it's a web code project which obviously has a lot of vulnerabilities, but the prompt has nothing to do with vulnerabilities. It's a very simple prompt that says, "Add me new functionality." And I assigned this to Copilot to develop this functionality. We'll talk in a second about Copilot and how it's developed there. But what you need to know is that I actually spun up two agents. One agent that doesn't have any rules file to follow, and another agent that does have the rules file to follow. The first agent that I spun up without the rules file is actually Cursor. I pasted exactly the same content in this agent. You can see also happened roughly an hour ago, and I asked it to generate a pull request with some code in it. Now, while it worked and generated some code, if we actually look at the pull request that it opened, and you can see that it's in a draft mode, but it doesn't need to be a pull request. It can happen on the client side. I just used an agent to demonstrate that it's absolutely disconnected from any IDE or anything that the dev needs to install. But of course, you can use Cursor agent on the developer's machine. It generates exactly the same results from a security perspective. And in this case, we can see that we have a draft PR and we implemented some functionality with my, there's a commit. And what you will see here is that we actually ran a SAST scan. And as I mentioned, there are issues going up the stack, right? And because in this project, authorization issues are fairly common, the newly generated code already has exactly the same authorization problem, which is essentially exposing endpoints for unauthorized use. Specifically here, it's even admin functionality. So it's a critical vulnerability.
And
Now,
this is just a general prompt, right? This is just something that someone would vibe code. This isn't some gotcha prompt that, is some an edge case, right? This is just a normal prompt someone could use.
correct.
Yep.
And by the way, the reason why I did this ahead of the time is just because it takes quite long to
Vibe coding takes a while.
generate. Yes, it
For
generates
Cursor, it takes a long
one.
time. For Arnica, it takes seconds to find the issue.
That's true.
Yes. So the generation is obviously the heavy task here. And this is why it's pretty much kind of rerun it. But in more than 80% of the cases, we actually see that same vulnerabilities are being repeated across pretty much new and existing repos.
Yeah. So I just want to clarify what we're seeing here, just so I understand, the audience understands. So you prompted the cursor, no hidden, prompts, build something as any developer would. We had no rule file. It generated insecure code. Arnica's AI SAST rule capture it, where traditional, static SAST rules would probably miss it because it's not very specific. And I see there's also a code suggestion. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yes. So part of the policies that I have configured in Arnica also include the AI code suggestion. So essentially, we're not only finding the vulnerability, we also, because we have all the context that we need with the vulnerability, we're also able to generate a code fix that is also designed to identify that the fix does not produce any new vulnerabilities and that it's a as tight fix as possible. Uh, that it can happen as a recommendation, which is here. You can see kind of very quick explanation about why this fix is the good fix. As well as you can, if you want to, just go ahead and commit the suggested code. This is something that works pretty much on every source code management solution that allows code suggestions, and that makes the fix very easy. So think about the workflow that we discussed beforehand, right? The workflow is, hey, we identify the vulnerability, and when we identify the vulnerability, we want to notify the dev about this risk. So the dev actually got the risk. The dev can access to this specific page and just click on commit suggestion, and you're done. You don't have the risk anymore, right? You don't need to involve the security team. And by the way, the pull request is in a draft mode. It's a concept that exists in GitHub, less in the others, that essentially even says, you know what, it's not even ready for a review. It's not ready for security. So the dev can fix vulnerabilities without even the involvement of the security team, either via Slack or Teams or in the source code management solution. Meaning the dev doesn't need to learn a security tool interface. It's all done within their own user interface. Now, let's look at maybe the other way where we do have rules. So in Arnica, we have a way, as I mentioned, to piggyback on pull requests. And by piggybacking on pull requests, we actually make sure that the rules that the security team writes are in the essentially in all repos in the company. So what we did with our policy is that we actually applied in the same repo, we applied a rules file for GitHub Copilot. You can actually, if we go to the code and look at here, you will see that I have a Copilot instructions file, which is something that essentially when Copilot specifically picks up the work, Copilot will know how to write the code securely by default. So will it? Well, or did it? That's the question. So actually it did. Um, so with the same, going back to this ticket, the way that I kicked off the functionality here is just I assigned the issue to Copilot and I asked Copilot to just go and develop this functionality as opposed to Cursor where I pasted this text and asked it to build this. And this is the PR that Copilot it started creating and then took some time until it's built and tested and everything. But you can see here that it actually generated, explained everything that it did. But you can see here that first of all, there are no comments from Arnica. Let's see, did we scan this? Well, yes, we did. And there are no vulnerabilities in this code. Now you may wonder, how do we know? How do we know that AI respected the rules that we added to the repo. And this is where we have a very clever way to do this. So we actually prompted the um, with with our way, we prompted rule citation, meaning every single requirement we added, we prompted it in our way to add a specific rule ID for every requirement that we have. And we asked it to add it in a comment, and we asked it to cite for the specific rule ID so that we will know that AI actually followed those requirements. In our case, you can see that Arnie, which is our agentic uh, software development suite, actually took place here, right? So we know that, for example, here we checked for access control. Hey, we had an access control issue beforehand. Now we don't. And this is pretty much where you can see that, that the agent writes what it did and explains which rule it actually followed while writing the code. And as you can see, we scanned with Arnica's AI SAST and the deterministic SAST and a CA and secret. We did everything. We ran all scans possible with the most aggressive policy that we have configured. And yet, all of the code generated by the agent, and as you can see here in the search, um, we have 70 pieces of citation that told us, why the code that is generated by the agent is secure by default. Eran, anything else that maybe I missed that you'd like to add here?
I just want, obviously caveat, there's no 100% secure. If all you needed is a rule file and then all of your security problems are disappeared, then would be a perfect world. Unfortunately, we're not there yet, right? So dentists still recommend toothpaste. Unfortunately, it's still a thing, right? We wish. But again, this is shifting the focus onto the really critical items, right? You're going to get less obvious issues coming up for things that, anyone, why even bothering me without, a post method without authorization. So those are the things that are going to kind of slowly disappear. And then your focus as a security engineer and as a developer are going to be on the really, really important stuff. You're going to get your eyes both when you review and when Arnica AI SAST is reviewing your code to look at the bigger picture, the issues that move up the stack, the things that the agents wants to save tokens, right? They want to get the code out. Even if you give a very rule file, eventually, the more you write, the more you go into context, it becomes the IQ goes down of the agent. The more you do, the more you reprompt, the more you go. So this is a fantastic, layered security Swiss cheese approach of, you put guardrails, and then it allows you to focus on the hard things, and then you have time to actually focus on your backlog, right? Which is still, unfortunately, even if it was written by AI, the rules are only for new code. We wish, right? But the rules are only for new code. So yeah, that's I think that's
For now.
for now. But yeah, those going in tandem. We call it Arnie, the Arnie suite, where you can have it's going to trust by verify. The rules are there to make sure that the obvious things are not coming out, and then the rest is for catching the things that will really make get you a phone call at night when something bad happens. Recommend.